No. You all right?
Can I ask you your name, sir? Hey, Chief. Big guy.
Ladies and gentlemen, I'm Rena Radge. I'm the United States Attorney in Brooklyn. I'd like to do some introductions, then we have some remarks, and then we'll take questions, all right? On my right, the lady at the far right is Laura Ward, who's a special attorney with the Brooklyn Organized Crime Strike Force. Ed McDonald, the attorney in charge of our strike force here in Brooklyn. John Hogan, the assistant director in charge of the FBI office here in New York. Next to him, Jules Bonavolenta, the assistant special agent in charge of organized crime here in New York for the FBI. And finally, Doug Grover, a special attorney here in the Brooklyn Organized Crime Strike Force. Ladies and gentlemen, for the last 20 years, one of the largest, if not the largest, and most highly diversified organized crime group operating in New York has been the Gambino organized crime family. Yesterday, a federal grand jury sitting in Brooklyn charged much of the hierarchy of the Gambino family in a 17-count indictment, the leading count of which is racketeering, violation of the federal RICO statute. In so charging, the grand jury specifically names the Gambino family as the criminal enterprise, a venture so powerful as to operate in all 5 boroughs of the city of New York, in both suburban Long Island counties of Nassau and Suffolk, and in Westchester. The grand jury charges the family's members with commissions of crimes as varied and serious as murder, loan sharking, gambling, extortion, labor racketeering, and obstruction of justice. The indictment returned outlines the disciplined manner in which the family, as an entity, maintains its control over and insinuates its influence into entities as large as major labor unions, as economically significant as the Port Mobile Deepwater facility being built on Staten Island, and as representative of the American dream as local mom-and-pop stores. The indictment states how each level of family management is responsible to the next, not only for the decisions being made about criminal activities, but about the profits realized at each stage of the venture. Thus, the illicit proceeds of loan sharking work their way up from soldier to capo and from capo to boss. Ladies and gentlemen, this morning, agents of the FBI arrested 10 of the 16 individuals named in the indictment. Among these is Joseph N. Gallo, for many years the consigliere to the Gambino family. Among those indicted are 6 current capos of the family, 5 members of the family, the owner of one of the largest building and supply companies in New York, a former principal officer of the Steamfitters Union in New York, a current principal officer of the Mason Tenders Union, and a deputy clerk for the United States District Court in the Southern District of New York, the latter of whom obstructed justice in supplying confidential information about ongoing investigations to family members. This kind of an investigation represents not simply months, but years of efforts. The Federal Bureau of Investigation has worked for over 6 years in bringing together the evidence that supports the indictment returned yesterday. I have to extend my congratulations and my thanks to the FBI for the diligent and professional job they've done in this case. I also have to commend the outstanding work done by the Organized Crime Strike Force. This is only one of many recent cases in which they have made a dramatic impact on organized crime in this city. And particularly, I have to commend the attorneys Laura Ward and Doug Grover, who've worked so conscientiously on this case. Ladies and gentlemen, I think that Ed McDonald would now like to amplify some on the indictment for you.
Good afternoon. Before I address myself to the indictment, I'd like to just mention one thing. Many of you might know that Andy Maloney was confirmed by the Senate Judiciary Committee yesterday, and we expect that he'll be taking office as United States Attorney next week. We in the Brooklyn Strike Force look forward to his arrival in the courthouse as United States Attorney. However, on behalf of the Brooklyn Strike Force, I should point out that Rena Raggi, who has been the United States Attorney for the last 3 months, has done what I feel, and the people in my office feel, is an absolutely magnificent job. And I feel that it's only appropriate that on behalf of the Strike Force that I thank her for the cooperation, the assistance, the professionalism, the courtesy, and the leadership that she has shown to my office in the last 3 years. We're going to miss her very much in the Strike Force. Today, the federal government has dealt a major blow at the Gambino crime family, the largest and most powerful criminal organization in the United States. For the last 20 years, the Gambino crime family has been the most stable of the crime families in this area. However, in the past 7 months, while subjected to constant investigative scrutiny by the Federal Bureau of Investigation and other law enforcement agencies, the family has suffered unprecedented internal strife. The boss, Paul Castellano, the last 3 capos in the family, Frank DeCicco, Thomas Bellotti, and Agnello Della Croce, have either been murdered or died of natural causes. Other leaders have been murdered and incarcerated, and others are facing pending indictments. This all in the last 7 months. Today's indictment is directed at the current leadership of the family. These men, however, are no Johnny-come-latelys to the operation of the Gambino crime family. Indeed, they have been among the leadership of the family for the last 20 years. Today, they control and run the family. Joseph and Gallo from Queens, the consigliere of the family for almost the last 20 years, and the 6 men who are probably the most important capos in the family today. Joseph Armone, whose base of operations is in Lower Manhattan. James Fiella, who operates in Brooklyn and in Staten Island. Joe Butch Correo, who operates in Little Italy in Manhattan and in Brooklyn. Angelo Ruggiero, whose base of operations is in Queens. Joe Zingaro from the Bronx, and Robert DiBernardo, who has operated up and down the East Coast. In addition, the indictment charges 5 other significant members of the Gambino crime family with a wide variety of criminal activity. It also charged 4 important associates of the family, people who are indispensable to the operation, the lucrative operation of the Gambino family. 2 powerful labor union officials, Louis Giardina, an official with the Mason Tenders Union, and George Daly, the former principal officer of the Steamfitters Local in the New York metropolitan area. In addition, a wealthy businessman, the owner of a large lumber and building supply company, Julie Myron, has been indicted. And finally, Mildred Russo, for the last 15 years, a deputy clerk in the United States District Courthouse in the Southern District of New York in Manhattan, has also been charged with conspiring this racketeering enterprise. The seriousness of the charges and the status of the defendants are apparent from the indictment. But what is particularly significant about this case is that not only does it involve the most powerful figures in the family, but we have also indicted some of those who have been most insulated, those whose criminal activities have been most difficult to detect and to prove. It's true that certain of the defendants have lengthy criminal records. For instance, Joe Armone, one of the capos, has served many years in prison for trafficking in French Connection heroin. But of the 16 defendants charged today, 8 have never been convicted of a felony. Joe Gallo, who's 74 years old and as I said before, for over 20 years has been the consigliere of the family, has never been arrested before. James Fiella, 67, for years one of the most powerful capos in the family, has served only one 30-day contempt sentence. And Joe Zingaro, the Bronx capo, was last arrested in 1943 for operating an illegal still. The heart of the case is a massive racketeering conspiracy count. It charges the defendants, along with the former leadership of the family, including Carlo Gambino, Paul Castellano, Agnello Della Croce, and Thomas Bellotti, with operating the family through a pattern of criminal activity. This pattern of racketeering or criminal activity was most varied. It includes criminal activity which has taken place in all 5 boroughs of the city of New York, in Nassau and Suffolk County, and in suburban Westchester County. In addition, the criminal activity charged includes both traditional organized crime activities as well as the more sophisticated types of criminal activities in which organized crime figures have begun to engage over the last decade or so. The defendants are charged with operating the family through a pattern of murders, robbery, significant loan sharking and gambling operations, bribery and intimidation of witnesses, the bribery and corruption of public officials, labor racketeering, and extortion. The extortion crimes were the most lucrative for the defendants. One victim of their extortion activities was Stewart Color Laboratories, one of the largest photograph and color processing firms in the New York metropolitan area. The extortion consisted not only of threats of force and violence to the owner of the company, but also the use of more subtle forms of extortion. The owners of the company were threatened that unless large amounts of money were paid to the defendants, Stewart Color Lab would suffer labor problems. This count once again demonstrates the significance and the impact when organized crime figures gain control of labor unions. They're able to use labor unions as a tool of extortion, and rather than relying on and resorting to threats of force and violence, they're able to actually use legitimate institutions as forces and tools for extortion. Mom-and-pop operations were also not safe from the defendant's extortion. The Gambino crime family controlled the distribution of coin-operated video machines on Staten Island. Thus, the owners of candy stores, pizza parlors, and small delis were forced to use only machines from Gambino-controlled and Gambino-related companies. In addition, the defendants are charged with extorting the owner of a small construction contracting company in New York and the operator of a fruit and vegetable stand in Nassau County. The defendants are also involved, as charged in the indictment, with widespread labor racketeering. In connection with the construction of the Port Mobile oil terminal on Staten Island, the defendants promised non-union labor, with the ability to use non-union labor, and labor peace to the owner of the company installing the necessary pipework at the facility. This in return for $1,000, over $100,000. The payoff was made. It was split with George Daly, the principal official in the Steamfitters local in the New York metropolitan area. However, in this case, the defendants failed to produce, and the job was done, was performed and completed only with the use of union help. Finally, the charges include the defendant's activities in corrupting a deputy clerk in the United States District Court in the Southern District of New York, Mildred Russo. Mrs. Russo for years has had access to confidential information about criminal cases, and for years the defendants, the members of the Gambino family, have conspired to corrupt her and have her supply to them and other members of the family secret information about criminal cases in the Southern District of New York. Now, it's easy for me to get up and to talk about this case. It's easy for me because the real legal work in this case was done by the attorneys in my office. Rena has already congratulated them, and I also would like to congratulate Bruce Mao, and the members of the squad should be congratulated on the magnificent job that they've done in investigating this case and putting it together. It is their case. With that, at this point, I would like to introduce the Assistant Director in charge of the Federal Bureau of Investigation's New York office, John Hogan.
Thank you. And thank you for the very kind remarks about the work of the men and women of the FBI in New York. Several years ago, the FBI came up with the idea to attack organized crime in a different manner, to attack the family structure itself, using the enterprise theory of the RICO statute. We've come a long way since we started. We had the recent convictions of the Colombo family. We had the convictions in the Bonanno family. We have the indictment that's outstanding against the Genovese group. We have the up-and-coming commission case. We had the Matty the Horse Ianello conviction. And today we have the indictment of the Gambino group here, the largest, with membership of over 400 nationwide. Not only do we have the indictment, we have the recent untimely deaths of some of the members, the natural death of a member. And I believe, as a result of this combined together, we have the total leadership in disarray. I think that with continuing this pressure, that we can have a lasting impact on organized crime here in New York City. Going one step further, we can also consider the use in all of these cases of civil RICO and rid private industry, unions and so forth, of the criminal activity. We're not anti-union. We want to return the unions to the members themselves. I have the resources. This investigation, as we've mentioned, is a long-term investigation. We've developed an enormous intelligence base. We will continue to investigate and hopefully, with that pressure, develop more cases that will make this city safer for each and every one of us. Thank you.
Questions?
Questions, ladies and gentlemen?
Yeah, why was John Gotti not named in this indictment? Is he the John Doe?
John Gotti is currently under indictment in this courthouse and is expected to be tried in August before Judge Nickerson. I think it's you can see from the indictment, if you compare it to the Gotti indictment, that several of the charges overlap. And you can draw your own conclusions with respect to who unindicted co-conspirators might be in this case.
So are you saying that John Gotti is an unindicted co-conspirator in this
Well,
case?
I'm saying that John Gotti is charged with many of the similar crimes, so I think you can draw your own conclusions on that.
What happened to Robert DiBernardo?
Are the John Does and Brian Does that are named, are they cooperating with you, or are they?
No, I'm not saying that. I think that the fact that people are named John Doe or Brian Doe doesn't mean that they're cooperating. It's just that there are various reasons in which I don't feel it would be appropriate to go into at this point as to why we have called them John Doe or Brian Doe.
The officials who were bribed, were they cooperating, or are they also going to be indicted later?
Well, the one official who the indictment charges with criminal activity is Mildred Russo, who was an official court clerk in the Southern District of New York, and she is charged. The other bribery charges involving public officials were actually non-existent public officials. They were conspiracy to commit. The charges involved conspiracy to commit briberies, and the public officials were not actually corrupted. It was an attempt to corrupt public officials, and other public officials other than Mildred Russo were not involved in this case.
How did Mildred Russo get involved with the family?
That's something that's a matter of evidence which we will be proving in court, and I really can't get into. It's something that requires going beyond the scope of the indictment, and I think would be inappropriate to go into at this point.
Where is she now, Ed? Where's Mildred now?
She was arrested this morning, and at the same time she was charged with substantive violations in the Southern District of New York, and she's charged with the racketeering violations here. It's my understanding that she was arraigned sometime this morning in the Southern District of New York, and she'll be brought here within the next hour or so.
How old a woman is she?
In her 60s.
She's in her 60s.
There's evidence or allegations that this has been going on for many years?
Yes. I mean, the indictment charges that it's a pattern of activity that has been going on for some time.
How did they turn her?
She's not cooperating. She's a defendant.
Well, which came first for Mildred Russo? Did she get that job to extract information, or did she have that job in a hidden?
Again, that requires me going into something that's evidentiary, and I think it's inappropriate to go into.
In all of these.
Well, let's put it this way. Maybe this will answer your question. She's not charged. She's been working there for 15 years. She's not charged with conspiring. In her part of the indictment, she's not charged with participating in the conspiracy for the entire 15-year period.
With all of these threats of violence, and I'm not through reading this thing, did anybody get hurt in this case or beat up, or did they make good on any of these threats to physically hurt people?
Yes.
Tell us.
Well, I don't want to go into the whole.
Is it in here?
Yeah, it's in there. I mean, there are charges of
They beat
beatings.
people up, they broke arms or legs, they killed people, or
Well, there are
outside of the family.
Okay. Outside of the family, people were actually physically abused.
The two
Connection
cases
with
that you
this case.
mentioned in the indictment, Peter Tambone and John McBratney,
Right.
could just mention the names. What happened in those cases?
John McBratney was murdered in Staten Island, I believe in 1973, and Peter Tambone involves a conspiracy to kill Peter Tambone, who was a member of the family, member of the Gambino family, in 1981, 1980, 1981, 1982, and he was never executed.
Who was McBratney?
I'm sorry.
Okay.
McBratney seems to be about the most murdered guy in the world. I mean, we've had Gotti go.
Well,
I mean,
that's okay. Well, if you
we talk about murders here, and it would appear that we have one single murder of which someone's already gone away for, and the conspiracy. It sounds like the next people are going to indict the Russian army.
Well, McBratney, there is a McBratney murder charge in the Gotti indictment. Gotti is charged in that case with participating in the murder with other people. The person who was charged in this count, in this indictment.
Can you explain what Mr. Guzman here refers to as the mob frequent flyer list? What do all these trips mean?
They were trips that were made in connection with what we call the Travel Act, which was traveling back and forth between New York and Florida, telephone communications between New York and Florida, in connection with the. He was working in connection with an undercover investigation.
Oh, so he was traveling as someone else with these guys.
Right. Now, there's no suggestion that there was any FBI agent who was involved in corrupt activity. No, he was an undercover operative who was working with a. He was an.
What his role was?
Well, I would prefer not to. Okay.
Question for Ms. Raji. Will your office be moving to put the Steamford Local 638 under some form of stewardship?
I think that the actions that are going to be taken in this,
That's all right.
the actions that are going to be taken in this case, either criminal or civil, will be taken here by the strike force, which has worked the case. And so I don't think we're prepared to comment as to what we expect to do beyond